Hello, everybody. My name is Jon Love, and welcome Beyond the Drip, a podcast about everything in the infusion therapy. I'm here with my co-hosts, Pamela McIntyre, Brian O'Sullivan, and Brandon Carpenter. This month, it's Halloween, and we have a very special edition of Beyond the Drip that we're calling Tales from the Drip, a collection of the scariest stories that we've ever heard or seen in the infusion therapy market. Hey, everybody. How are we doing today?
Great, John.
Very good. Thank you.
Good. Guys, so this is Halloween, and it's our Halloween edition of Beyond the Drip. So we're calling it Tales from the Drip, all of our scary stories. You remind all of our listeners that my name's Jon Love with ProChant, and we also have Pamela McIntyre, who's our operations expert. We have Brian O'Sullivan, our payer guy, and finally our tech guru is Brandon Carpenter. Each one of these people own or run their own businesses, and we all represent a different thing that puts all of infusion together. That's why it's called originally Beyond the Drip. Everything that happens outside of the actual dripping the medicine. Guys, this month, Tales from the Drip, a play on the old Tales from the Crypt that we're old enough to have been scared senseless by when we were young. So really wanting to figure out what are the scariest stories you've heard in our industry. Before that, though, I have a very pressing question, okay? Pressing, the most important question we probably will have, which is, I'd like to hear, 30 seconds, that's it, the worst Halloween costume you've ever had a part in. Could be you, could be your kids, could be anything. I'm going to start while you think, because I sprung it on you. So Ashley, my beloved wife of 19 years, we had our first child, Anderson, and we were in this tiny little house like everybody is when they start life, right? And we had, and he was like, 5 months old. And she had gone to this little consignment shop and gotten this little dinosaur costume for like $9. And we were broke. And so but this was your first kids, even though he can't talk or do anything much except smile and laugh, but we're going to dress him up, right? And then take him around, right? Everybody will give him candy, we'll eat it. We had the whole plan. And she texts me, I got him the cutest little dinosaur costume. And then she comes back and she texts me, and the day before Halloween, she goes, and I said, what's uh-oh? She's like, it wasn't a dinosaur costume. And I said, what was it? She goes, it's a pea pod. I said, what? She's like, he's going as a vegetable. A vegetable. And so we dressed our son, and I had it in my head of this cute little dinosaur. The entire time it was a 3 pea pod. So the only thing that showed was his face. The rest of it was completely green with the peas and a little curlicue on top. And so we drug him around the neighborhood with our little baby pea pod. And so that was probably our biggest costume failure, I would say. And so, Pam, you got anything that comes to mind? Worst costume failure for you?
Yeah, it was when I was working in the oncology clinic, and I dressed myself with great detail as Medusa. It was a big hit all day. I had the big hair with the snakes coming out of it, and the black robe, and just really, green skin. And one of my little patients that I used to go out and see, a little PD patient, went out and got him from the hall because he didn't want to come in the room until he had to. And so I went out and got him from the hall, and I went out and I put my hand out. And then normally the kid would jump into my arms, and he looked at me and he screamed.
Bloody murder. So you terrified your own patient. You did such a good job.
I didn't anticipate that well. I should have been thinking.
So you're saying that in a pediatric setting, don't set up like an evil witch? Okay. Don't dress up like that? That's fair.
Probably not the best idea.
Lesson learned. Brandon, do you have a time that you dressed up as Medusa to tell us about?
So not Medusa, but a funny story. So it was actually my wife or my wife's sister. I can't remember which. But when they were growing up, they were going to a party, and they dressed as a bag of jelly beans. Okay, not a big deal. The way you make a bag of jelly beans is you put on a garbage bag and fill it with aired up balloons. Well, logistically, they weren't really thinking about it. So here they are walking to the car, surrounded by balloons, get in the car, sit on a balloon, pop.
Nice.
And then that scares you, right? And then you jump and you get another one. And it was like, according to my wife, it was like, watching the disintegration of a, really well thought out but poorly executed costume while sounding like you were having a bag of popcorn being made in the microwave.
Wow.
So
there's nothing like multiple pops inside of a vehicle to make you not drive well, right? Like who's shooting the gun? So Brian, have you ever sat on balloons in a car?
I have not, but I could see where that would have been my bright idea of
logistically though.
Couldn't think 3 steps ahead of how to execute this. So anybody who knows me, this will not surprise them. I don't dress up very often, right? Even for costume parties, I don't dress up. So anyway, so I've done it a few times. So I'm going to go the other way. And one of the times I actually did it well. So my daughter graduated from nursing school. She was on her own. She'd moved back to Phoenix, and she was having a party with her roommate. It was in the second year. So I dressed up as her, and she is the same height as me. She's about 6'2". She has the same color hair. So I put a wig on, I put a scrubs, and I think we had a picture of her badge, right? So I kind of mocked up a badge, and so I was my daughter Megan, and it was good and funny, and awesome. I pulled it off because we actually looked a little bit alike. So, anyways, not a bad execution, but probably on one hand, the times I've dressed up and actually done a good job.
Listen, I thought you were gonna. I thought you said, "Well, I dressed up as Ronald Reagan every year for 6 straight years." That's what I thought you were gonna say, Brian. Knowing you, I was like, I thought he dressed up for Reagan every year. Why could I get a better costume? But dress up your daughter is a all-time dad troll, and I love a good dad troll. Love a good dad troll. Love a good dad joke. So, guys, Tales from the Drip, the scary collection of the scariest stories in Infusion. I'm going to do this 2 ways. Here's what I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you for a macro and then a micro, right? What I mean by macro is, what are you seeing in the market that scares the hell out of you? I don't mind saying that, okay? I mean, what do you see in our industry that you're like, no one's paying attention to this? And I'm watching this drunk driver right in front of me swerve, and I'm saying nobody's paying attention to this, and I know what's going to happen. That's what I'm looking for, okay? And then after that, a micro, which is an individual story you've seen that's just like, I can't believe it. So, Pam, I think we'll start with you on the macro side. When you look over across infusion therapy, we're talking about home infusion, specialty infusion, AIC. You're out there, infusion nurse consulting. You own that business. You're traveling place to place. You're helping people train. You're helping people with all things. You're starting startups, right? You're doing such an amazing job. What are you seeing that's making you lose some sleep at night in the industry as a whole? Do you see any trends?
Yeah, I think everybody has one on their corner, and I'm talking about med spas. And maybe not necessarily med spas as much as drip bars.
So for the audience, you're saying med spas, wellness clinics, drip bars, right? These are the vitamin flush and the hangover stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll come back to hangovers because I'm kind of split there. But we continue to be one big bad storm away from a huge component shortage on the market. Right now, there's a huge shortage of IV fluids because of the recent hurricane. Right. Baxter in North Carolina shut down.
North Carolina, Baxter shut down, yeah.
Yes. So all of a sudden, there's this huge void in the market. And they talk about surgeries being put off, elective surgeries. Well, an elective surgery can be a hip replacement for your parent who's had a painful hip with a potential fracture for a year. That's considered elective.
Yeah, don't get Brian started on that because he's going to start talking about being in England and them saying, well, that's elective. Like, well, you're elective me to be in pain for 10 months. Like, I'd like to not be in pain, right? So that I'm sure he'll find a way to get to one payer at some point. Keep going.
He'll get there.
Yeah.
I've got to get my 2 bits in first, though, because we're going to go on after that. But so we've got the IV shortage, but compounding that is the wellness spas and the drip bars that administer IVs with not necessarily licensed personnel. Trained doesn't mean licensed. In some states, a physician can delegate to an unlicensed personnel. In some instances, there's no physician on site, and you've got an unlicensed person administering these treatments. Most of these places are not drawing baseline labs before they give the IVs. They are also putting additives in these IVs. No oversight into mixing in most cases. In many cases, it's entirely up to the discretion of the patient what they want, or to the spa what they're offering, whatever package it is. There's not a lot of scientific or medical determination into what's administered in a lot of cases. So not only are we using fluids, we're using components. And if there's any dietitians or pharmacists listening, how many of you have struggled with shortages and trying to reformulate TPN for patients because you don't have the components that you need? The other thing is hydration. Patients that have verified medical needs, whether you need it before your IG or whether you have POTS whatever you need your hydration for in order to function, it may not be available. And you
Or
may
you
have
could
to.
be coming off pneumonia, right? You could be coming off anything, right? Just
Exactly.
severely dehydrated due to a
Fluid.
terrible, terrible pneumonia, right?
Yes. So that fluid may not be available to you. Businesses may have to cut back on hydration patients because they've had to divert and use it for their most acutely ill people. A spa, because of what they charge, because it's cash pay, can afford to pay in many times tenfold elevated price for the components for a bag of fluids, where the reimbursement on hydration is not enough to even begin to offset what some of these third-party vendors are charging for the bags.
So that's really compelling, right? I mean, and Brian, I know I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Pam just said, because the market is going to do what the markets do, right? The cash is worth more. But there has to be some type of regulation to protect in a shortage, right? Because we can't go away from TPN to get to vitamin B flush wellness, right?
Well, it's interesting as Pam was sharing, I was thinking, oh, she's almost talking, and I'm not saying this, like a payer of, she held back on hangovers because maybe that meets medical necessity criteria. You really need it when you're hungover.
There is a lot of self-induced injury. That, I mean, if I break my arm because I fall down because I'm half in the bag, that's still reimbursable. But in that versus
I did. I fell down on half a bottle of Jack Daniels once, and the next morning I self-inflicted lots of harm on myself. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of incidents in Las Vegas and Nashville and in places of that nature. So I guess I'm just too predictable because you already referenced Reagan, right? So I was thinking about that and single payer of having seen the Reagan movie recently of the quote of in this present crisis, government is not the problem, not the solution or a problem, it is the problem. As we keep going back to a single payer, I think the healthcare system is really messed up. But as a country, as we talk about this, the politicians on both sides, or all three sides or four sides, how many we have, use the word healthcare. What they mean is health insurance. And there's a vast difference, right? Of you can have health insurance but not have access to care. And you can get health care without health insurance, right? So, we've got one candidate, I'm not trying to go too political here, but that, as a candidate a number of years ago said, let's eliminate all of that and move on. And I think the foundation of our private health insurance is really good and admirable, but there's been a lot of government intervention in Medicare and Medicaid regulations that make it more expensive. So to kind of answer your question there, John, I'm a little hesitant to say we need government intervention to say who can buy IV fluids. But I think as we learned from COVID, the supply chain, I think something, we do corn subsidies for farming, right? Do we need some redundancy in our supply chain that might make things more expensive? And government could say, hey, look, you need an East Coast and a West Coast distribution center, something like that, where we've got some safety.
I agree, Brandon. If we got mad at Change Healthcare because you were way too big to fail and we need more of these things so that we don't, then we can't allow 80, 70% of the saline to be sitting in a warehouse, right? That's just smart, right? That's not even government. That's just like, hey, let's not put everything in one place.
Well, and the interesting part of that, right? And I think I probably share in Brian's view of the government is not the solution nor the problem. And
all of you owners and all of you people who own your own company share that. Nobody believes that, right? Because you own a company. You 100%. So we know who you are already, right?
Yeah. What is it Reagan said? The most deadliest words or the most dangerous words are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure you are.
So, but let's just be honest, right? Like the question is why did these, distributors and such think that it's good practice anyway to have all of our supply in one location, And
sure, it's a monetary decision.
I mean, I'm sure there is some sort of decision.
Monetary decision.
Yeah. But, from that perspective, I think, we always talk about, single points of failure and how we want to get rid of that and add redundancy. Yet it's okay for something as important to our healthcare system to be in a single point of failure. And again, let's be honest, right? Double standards are out there everywhere you look. So, I'm sure that, having the right lobbyist is key to having all of that in place too.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, if we can, keep certain countries out of, agriculture in our own, country, certainly we can say, it's probably best to, make sure that, a hurricane can't wipe out our supplies of certain things.
Yeah, I agree. But what and I'm about to move to you, Brian, for your macro scariest thing. But I do want to finish with what Pam, because I think Pam brings up an amazing point. There's this is a two-headed dragon here, right? The one is just the supply chain. The other is, are we certain that all these med spas and wellness, they're moving into AICs, guys? Yeah. Pam, I want to hear from you before we move on, because you're our North Star, Pam. We put you on here for a reason, right? Not just because you're talented but also that you're a nurse. No matter what you do with your career, you're still a nurse, which means you care for your patients, right? As the person here who's going to advocate for the patient, how concerned are you about all of these med spas, wellness? And they're like, hey, we're just going to hire an RN and start pumping out Ocrevus and Tepezza and like what? Yeah. Can you talk to us for just 2 or 3 minutes on that?
I've been pulling my hair out for about 1.5 years now because I've seen the trend. There's a couple of things that are happening there. First of all, the centers, they're realizing once they hire their nurses that nurses are not interchangeable. It would be like trying to send me to an operating room to be the first to be a circulating nurse on a surgery. Right. It's not happening, nor would they be able to function in my role. Because the infusion industry is so niche, nurses have to be able to mix. Nurses have to be able to function as somewhat a reimbursement person, but they also have to know how to read a package insert and monitor patients for these issues that come up during the infusion. And some of these products, if you don't give them correctly, patients can die.
That's what I'm worried about, Pam. That's what I'm worried about is got a med spa, my friend's an RN, we're going to go over here and open this up. And it's like, I mean,
Pam, I'm just curious, how long before you think something that rivals the whole compounding pharmacy thing a few years ago happens, right? I mean, we're going to realize, oh gosh, there's nobody really paying attention to these compounding pharmacies, or there's no oversight and they're just mixing this, stuff up and now people are dying. I mean, is that where you feel like that's headed?
Well, there's an organization now that has a name similar to Infusion Nurses Society and NICA that purports itself to be an infusion specialty organization. But what it is it's a group of business owners that have a new organization that is the mouthpiece of drip spas.
Wow.
The components to run a successful IV or a med spa are nowhere the same as an AIC. So I've got calluses on my feet because I've been jumping up and down for about 2 years now. Every single investment group I talk to, I try to impress upon them that please don't extrapolate nursing experience from one realm to another. Nurses that work in a med spa are not ready to automatically transition to an AIC. They require training. They require bumpers on the bowling lanes. They really need some mentoring so they don't hurt your patients.
That's really interesting. I actually had somebody tell me like, yeah, we have this app now that we're able to, basically take a nurse directly out of, nursing school and put them into the patient's home and they're just as good. And I'm like, if Pam McIntyre could hear you say that.
Yeah. All right. I want to move Brian to you. Scariest thing you see macro. What are you seeing out there? What are you worried about?
Just one more comment on what Pam said. Since we're talking about Halloween, now I'm thinking about witch's brew. You get out the spell book, and you got this bubbling.
This thing's going totally off the rails, and I love it. I love it. As every Halloween episode, it should, right? It should. I like it. Go, Brian. Go.
Right. somebody, a lady with a big nose, a bunch of warts, and a crazy evil laugh, just adding drips of really weird ingredients, right? And witches aren't regulated, right? I mean, they don't have licenses. And so, they put anything in this tincture, and then you take a drip of it. And we've seen this in Disney movies where somebody knowingly, drinks this, and then they become whatever, right? So, anyways, that's Disney.
There you go.
He said Disney.
I've got
He had daughters.
Yeah.
He had daughters. He knows Disney.
I
Yeah.
know these movies.
Disney has a significant amount of his revenue or his money, so he knows.
It's
I
time
have
to watch the
VHS,
movie about the
DVD,
three
and
witches.
Blu-ray, and now I stream
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah. The hocus pocus in us all, right?
Hocus pocus. That's what it is. Everybody has to watch
Exactly.
it.
So
All right,
I kind of touched on the single payer thing, but right now what's happening in Medicare Advantage, and I'm not trying to beat up Medicare Advantage plans at all. But
Aren't you?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And just go and cook, Brian. That's what the young kids say. Go on and cook them.
Come on.
Well, so the government changed the rules, right? So how they do RAF scores, risk adjusted factors. So their revenue tanked for 2024. It's getting worse in 2025. So all of a sudden, seniors who had loved vision benefits, hearing aid, gym memberships, over-the-counter drugs, all these extra things that they jumped into Medicare Advantage for. Now those are coming back. Health plans are maybe getting out of certain geographies because the money's not there anymore, right? So those kind of situations where government makes the rules, for-profit health plans, and I'm not for-profit, not-for-profit, doesn't make that much difference. And then all of a sudden things change for seniors. In a single payer environment, that would be all of us, right? If government changes the rules, and then all of a sudden it's more difficult to get access to care. Stuff that we used to depend on or rely on is gone overnight because of a rule change. That to me seems scary. I don't have my Vincent Price voice, but it is terrifying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Brandon, do you mind if I jump in here? Because I think my big picture scary, because I goes alongside that, and then we'll come to you, or if you're okay with that.
Sure, that's fine. That's fine.
The biggest thing that I have is I want to talk about what Brian said. Brian, my concern with everybody saying we're going to go to one payer, we're going to, there's so much wrong with payers. Listen, nobody gets beat up by payers more than here, right? We beat up payers, but I want to beat everybody. We live in a world with pendulums, right? And we just swing it over here. This is our whole political. Because you swing it over here, I'll swing it over here. Most of us are in the middle, just getting hit by them, right? Because we actually don't want to live over here or over here, right? Like the crazy right and the crazy left. I'm just going to say it. Most of us want to live in some version of classic liberal to classic conservative and moderate. I think that's 80%, right? So I'm going to take that take, right? Versus far left and far right, which I think is 10 and 10. And Brian, I'm going to say that, but the one thing that we really get wrong in a lot of things, but here for sure, is because there's things wrong with the private payers that this other thing must be much better. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean that there's something that we have to throw it out. It doesn't mean that we have to throw it out. It's like capitalism. I'm not trying to say capitalism's perfect. I'm trying to say it's the best thing we have right now, right? It's the best thing we've ever found, and we should work on it. But everybody's like, well, here, look, there's problems with capitalism, so let's go to no, there's not something better. There's not something better than the private payers, okay? We know that. A one-payer government-owned system is not better. So we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, Brian. Does that make sense?
It does. And the human element of I think the problems in the private sector are related to humans and who we are, right? As people, right? Greedy, whatever. So the errors in capitalism, you put the same people in, and they'll run socialism, right? They'll run a single payer system, and we'll have to deal with other problems, shortages, things like that, rather than price or other types of frustration. So I absolutely agree, John.
Yeah. I'm going to go off that same thing, right? The scariest thing I see overall in the marketplace is payer dominance and monopoly. I want more payers. I'm going to give you guys, we only have a couple minutes for this, but I'm going to give you guys, there are 4 states where over 70% market share are held by 1 or 2 insurers. 4. Who knows the states? Who thinks they know them? Any guesses?
Well, I bet it's probably some remote ones like Hawaii is one.
Hawaii's going to be 178% owned by one payer. 3 out of 4 people. I mean, they're going to be able to do whatever they want. There's no competition. Keep going. Anybody else got an idea?
North Dakota?
Not North Dakota, but really high. Not North Dakota, though, right? The highest in the country is Alabama. 80% Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Wow.
88 out of 10 lives on one pay. Like, whatever they say, you must do.
Did you say Boo Cross?
Well, it depends on if it's boo like a ghost or just us booing payers, like just yelling boo at them because we hate them.
Maybe double meaning, you know.
Surprisingly, particularly among my, a very liberal area in Michigan, led by a pretty liberal governor, to be allowed 72% of all Michiganders on Blue Cross Blue Shield. You would thought that, hey, there needs to be more competition and not allowing somebody. And then finally, Delaware, 75% is Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. Guys, we cannot have 70+% of a state on a payer. We got to have. So the scariest thing for me in the market is that we need more payers. We have to break up payers. They just keep buying and buying and buying. And we know, and I'm watching, I'm riding down the freeway at 75 miles per hour. The guy in front of me or girl in front of me is just, and I don't know if they're drunk or asleep, but I know I'm just waiting for it to play out. I'm watching a crash happen. We cannot have 75%. And it's like, no one's paying attention. It will not lead. Where will that lead? Brandon Carpenter, where will that lead to good?
I mean, I just think about, a couple episodes ago when we talked about, Google getting busted up for antitrust and how I think only like 60% of all internet searches are through Google, 60. Yep. But meanwhile, we're talking about payers that have 70 and almost 80% of the market. Somebody would have already busted that up again, unless they have a really great lobby.
He said it out loud, payers, don't come after me. That's Brandon Carpenter, who lives in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Hey.
Some town right outside of there that I don't know about. Okay, that's the scariest thing I see. Brandon Carpenter will finish on the macro side with you. As you look around, so Brent, you own, real quick, shout out to Brian O'Sullivan, owner of the O'Sullivan Group. Payer strategy, credentialing, things of that nature. If you're having trouble with payers, he's traveling around the country helping people with that. Brandon, you're MedEdge, a large tech and software company for home infusion, specialty pharmacy providers. You're traveling around. You have all these different. What is scaring you in the marketplace, macro?
So what's really scaring me is the number of cyber attacks coming into the healthcare industry, right? Okay. You start to see this stuff. I mean, obviously the big one this year has been Change Healthcare, right? But that's the noisy public one. The thing you don't realize is how many things are happening that you don't hear about. And, you can probably Google, pharmacy data, ransomware or something like that. And ransomware, is just such a costly thing to the healthcare industry because, I was at a conference back in early September and they were saying, healthcare data is far more valuable than, social security numbers and data bursts on the dark web. Right.
Wow.
And you think about this, right? And we're also in the middle of, in our industry, a major, EMR that's been the industry pillar for 30 years, sunsetting. And a lot of these pharmacies are sitting here going, well, I don't want to lose control of my infrastructure and have to go to a SaaS environment. And what I'm telling these guys is, why wouldn't you? Do you really want to battle the forces that have, all of these, resources by yourself? Or do you want to group it together and not have to be responsible for it and make, some bigger EMR software company who they've got a team of people globally fighting these things? Do you really think that you as an operator of 2 or 3 sites can really handle all the sophistication and keeping up online? Like, I can't imagine what's, you're stepping over dollars to pick up dimes from that perspective, right? Like, you don't understand the risk that your system's at.
Imagine what you just said. Let's just pause and make sure everybody listening. We have, we talk to a lot of people. We're not Joe Rogan or, all the other podcasts that have millions and millions of people. So we don't proclaim that. But in our little industry, we have a lot of leaders listen to us. They come up, they talk to us, and we have a lot of C-suite people and a lot of owners listen to us, right? Imagine now what you just said. And I want everybody to listen to this. Imagine what Brandon just said. And imagine you got into running an infusion pharmacy or AIC, some type of specialty pharmacy, and now your healthcare data is more at risk than like a bank. 10 years ago, that would have been like, what are you talking about? Right? All we care about is getting your credit card. All we care about is and they're like, we don't care about that. If we get your credit card, we get that one spend, right? But if we get your healthcare, man, now we can ransom this for it. And it's like, goodness gracious. I mean, that's terrifying, guys. Am I wrong?
No, you're not. So, then they start looking at this, especially like if you're a publicly traded company or, those types of things. And now you're having to do, I talked with one pharmacy and they're like, yeah, we're having to run down who these guys are, because if we do pay the ransom, are they tied to terrorism? Are they tied to, other things? And it's like, now we've got a whole other ball game that we're fighting against. And so from that perspective, and, they're like, we just simply, missed a couple of warning signs, or maybe the training isn't up to date, right? You got to train your people on, you can't click on these links that come in, because now the sophistication of what's coming in your email looks real.
Listen, and it's coming from multiple levels, and we don't have a ton of time to spend on this, but I'm getting a text from a CEO friend of mine who says, hey, I'm texting you from my other number, but hey, will you call me? And it has their name on it, right? But like, it's an actual CEO of a company I work with. And how would I not know that person is? I mean, people have multiple phones, right? And so it's sophisticated, guys. And listen, if you're dumb like me, you're a target. I'm going to be honest, right? Because I'm like, oh, I'm sure it's fine. It's like, it's not fine. I almost had a Facebook thing. My wife laughed at me and said, John, that's a scam. Stop. Look at all the pictures. See how every house is different? And I'm like, I wondered why the prices were so good. And so I got to think I'm not the dumbest person in the world. So there's a lot of vulnerability there. There really is. Yeah. I think there's a lot of scary things. Now I want to transfer to the micro. All right. So this is kind of relying on, your personal experience. Pam, you ran RCM for one of the largest providers of infusion services in the country for years. Brandon, you've run, executive at multiple companies and data in this. Brian, you've been serving folks for 30,000 years or whatever it is. I'm just kidding.
10 plus, John. It's 10 plus.
Sorry, 10 plus. Sorry.
With a dinosaur.
Yeah, there you go. Great. Brian ducked the meteorite. And he's like, I just made it out, guys. It's just me. It caught all the dinosaurs. No, we do love Brian. He's got all the experience here. So a micro story. Now, we need to change the names and the likenesses, right? All right. But Pam, you got a story that just, guys, I'll tell you a story and it'll make your hair stand up.
I gotcha. And this, you can extrapolate this to all different types of all types of businesses in the infusion industry. But I worked with a company in my past as a consultant where they had their authorization set in the system to be the duration of the prescription. And everybody remembers a few years ago where payers all of a sudden weren't going to authorize for a whole year anymore. They were moving them every 6 months. And physicians were writing the scripts for a year. And it wasn't unheard of. And it happened several times across the country where a patient would continue being treated on that order without an authorization, not getting paid. Oh. And we're talking about specialty drugs. Very impactful.
Wow.
Yeah, but those are only like $6 or $8 a fill, right, Pam?
Specialty
drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, you can stay in your nice little world over there, Brandon, but don't forget the multiple. So that there's that. And on the hands-on side, when you're talking about nursing care, you have to pay attention to your infrastructure. So when I drop policies and procedures for a company, on purpose, I go through what are you going to give for products? Because not only do you have to have the product, you have to have the antidote. And it doesn't matter whether it's something as simple as an anti-kit or as something as complex as something to resolve an extravasation of adriamycin. You have to have an antidote on hand for whatever product you're giving. And not only do you have to have the antidote, it has to be in date. So make yourself a process for that. And if that includes asking your patients on every fill for home infusion, tell me what the date is on your EpiPen.
So
You
you saw this infusion spot, this pharmacy, just producing out for months and months and not having no clue that they didn't have valid auths.
2 treatments on a specialty drug.
So there's $100,000 that we threw down the toilet. So that's nice, right? Right. And we find out about that later. And hey, that's the knock, right? Coming to the boss. Who wants to tell the boss, he or she, like, hey,
oh my gosh. And I'll tell you another one.
you're not getting $100,000 extra, guys, because I kind of just screwed this thing up. Go ahead, Pam.
Here's another one. You have to really be careful on the names of your IG products. And I have a case where a nurse administered the wrong IG product. Very similar names.
Yeah.
Patient, yes, it was a med error. Physician was fine. It was, it was a drug that was approved for the indication. Guess what? It wasn't what it was authorized for. You're not getting paid.
We would remind our viewers what we always say. This is not college or high school where you had a 10,000 essay and you missed a comma here and a colon here and you got a 98%. It's a zero-sum game, right? If you don't dot an I, they don't pay you anything. And that's, Pam, that's what you're talking about. Like, it doesn't matter that the scope, the treatment, everything was in line. They were like, yeah, but we found the needle in the haystack that requires us to, or doesn't require us to pay you. So guess what? You get nothing.
That's what it's all about. So this is part of the reason that ASCO and ONS went to a 4-step double check for chemo.
Yep. Smart.
And it's not just double checking before you administer. It's double checking before you actually drop the diluent and dilute the drug, because you can waste a drug worth tens of thousands of dollars by mixing it incorrectly. You can do a good job checking and catching it, patient, near miss, but you didn't harm the patient, but you harmed your organization. If you catch those before it happens in your organization, please treat it as a bonus. You did a good job. You didn't mix this as a near miss, but we didn't suffer financially, and those need to be celebrated.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I'm gonna get off my soapbox here.
Yeah, no, 100%. Brian, what have you seen? Real story? You got anything for us?
I've got a few. When you see a movie and it says based on a true story, right?
Yeah.
So I have kind of a conglomerate of that. It's when you go to a movie and it says based on true events, right? It's not one story, it's a bunch of stories woven together. They're all true, but it's not one. So, representing clients with payer negotiations, renegotiations, probably the most terrifying. This is a long time ago in my career as a relatively new consultant. I was working with an IPA, Independent Practice Association. So a bunch of physicians that aren't in a group practice, but negotiate payer contracts, kind of like a modern day ACO before there were ACOs, right? Negotiating with a payer, and we thought we were through the Department of Justice, clinically and financially integrated safe harbor. This payer felt otherwise and threatened us to turn us over to the DOJ, right? So, second largest payer in the country, and a group of physicians in small town Arizona, right? With no reserves, not an attorney on retainer. So, decision to say, hey, look, we're not going David and Goliath here. We're going to play according to the rules and back off. But it was terrifying. To me personally, that would have been me going as the consultant driving this along with the physicians to court at some point.
Brian, are you saying that you don't like being on the Fed's radar? Is that what you're saying publicly?
No, nor would I have liked to answer questions,
100%,
interrogated, et cetera, et cetera. So similar kind of thing, negotiation, again, single specialty group was negotiating the contract, and we were trying to get some some rates from competitors, right? And I'm a consultant, I can do that. The CFO of this provider can't call the CFO here, but I can call around. Legal, got a cease and desist from this payer, and I called him. I said, hey, look, this is just market intelligence, right? I got a personal off the record from a VP that said, hey, look, it doesn't matter. I'm going to personally destroy you and your business if you keep up with this. like your name is mud, kind of like
Wow.
thing. So
I
anyways,
think you hit a nerve, Brian. I think you hit a nerve.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I almost wet myself. I think I could say that, right? In an
Like,
adult sort of way, right?
yeah.
Like, man,
Yeah.
I'm not ready for the major leagues, and this was a little bit tough. And
Yeah.
then a little more pedestrian, had a negotiation where, kind of along with what Pam was talking about, of dotting the i's and crossing the t's. As a bully tactic, they went to 100% medical record audit. Everything.
Oh yeah. Rack
Every
audit.
claim,
Yep.
right?
Full rack audit.
Claim in the middle
Yep.
of a negotiation, and their cash flow went from whatever a month to almost nothing. They thought they were going to bring them to their knees.
Everybody I think on here, Brian, is familiar with a full like Medicare rack audit, right? Like that's why we tell you, like, stay off their radar, guys. Stay off their radar. It's listen to your accountant when he says, yes, I could technically write off that home office, but it's not worth the risk that it triggers them to say, is this guy or girl just getting an extra $2,000 a year? You're like, listen to your accountants when they say it's better sometimes to tiptoe past dragons, even if you own the road. It's like, well, I have every right. People screw this up all the time, Brandon. I'm going to go to you next. But, it's people who deal in what should be and what is. And they're like, well, I should be able to stomp on my own road. That's great. But guess what? There's a dragon next to it. I would rather you just keep them quiet. That's what I would rather you do, and tiptoe past, right? Because we don't want that thing waking up. All right. Brandon, what do you got?
It's funny you say that, John. I use the analogy of, the car running the red light while you have a green light. Like, yes, you have the right of way, but if you see that coming, do you really want to be in front of that
want
thing?
to go out there and get smacked and tell them that you were right? That's your job? As you're picking up
I'm
your
dead,
broken arm?
But I was in the right. Like, what's it
makes
matter?
no
You're dead.
sense. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
So the dump truck
we always laugh about it, right? Like, yeah.
Yes.
Payers will tell you there's not a list, but we know there's a list.
And payers will tell you that they're benign. No, they're not. They're not benign, right? They're an alpha.
John.
They are not. But they are alpha organizations to which I give respect to, because I don't want the letter or the phone call that Brian got. All right. Which this episode's totally going to get me the letter and the phone call that Brian got.
I'll pass the torch to you, John.
I'm literally going to get a letter and be like, all right. So, guys, listen, I just want to talk. Next episode is about the joyous nature of payers and their great investment into our.
How we couldn't make it without them.
Brandon, you're up.
Yeah. So what I see a lot of, and it's just crazy, is everything that glitters is not gold, right? And I see a lot of folks buying into, the buzzwords from consultants, especially, West Coast consultants coming out of Silicon Valley, and, we're great at this and we do this. And I have seen clients who go out and spend $2 to $5 million on a data warehouse from these consultants who show really pretty things in their presentations. And they're like, oh, it's just data. And we know in our industry, data is nothing without context. And so what ends up happening is I've seen them, spend these, millions of dollars to get dirty data. And it's almost one of those things of lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? It's just like, they don't have anything dealing with it. And then the next thing you know is, not only did we spend $5 million to build this out, but now we're in this, $500,000 to $750,000 annual spend for our analysts who they don't understand the data set. And how could they? Because the people building it don't have it. And now they're just like, running their business off a data warehouse that nobody trusts, right? And if you can't trust your data, you're still just operating off an opinion. I've had people come to me and say, well, that's not what our data warehouse says. I says, well, I can trust my numbers and can proof my numbers. Show me how you proof yours. And then they start to backstep. It's like, well, I mean, we had these consultants, this, that, and the other thing. You start peeling back the onion and you get 2 or 3 layers deep and you're like, this thing's rotten underneath.
What I say to that, Brandon, is this is like someone saying, oh, I've been all over the Rockies. Mountains are mountains. Like, they're not. No, they're not. Afghanistan mountains aren't, and the Swiss Alps aren't, and certainly Nepal isn't. Like, mountains aren't mountains, right? Until you've been on that mountain, you don't know that mountain. And until you've been in this data set and the frustrating. So people say that all the time. And boy, they sure do waste millions of dollars on things that don't actually work. It's incredible. I'm going to finish up here with mine. I was on a phone call. I was VP of sales. Brandon Carpenter here was VP of professional services at Rock Pond Solution, a company that we ran together. And I was on a phone call with he knows this story, with a large independent specialty infusion pharmacy. And I was showing them some data and telling them, listen, you just have analytics problems. You need to be able to understand your data and push that down to your team and be able to find that data quickly. And, and I said, like, look right here, let's just analyze unbilled, and I said, we're sitting at $1 million in unbilled for 20 days. Pam almost died. And here's what he says to me. He says, well, that's great and all, but I mean, all you guys with your demo data, when do I get to see my data? And it was at that moment, he didn't realize, the owner, this was his data, that he had $1 million in unbilled for 20 days, just unbilled. His team hadn't billed it. And I said to him, this is your data. And the pause was deafening. And he said, are you saying this is my current data? And I said, yes. And he said, hold on a second. Again, remember, name change for privacy. He says, hold on. And I can hear him go, get Diane in here now. And he's like, 1 second. And the pause just gets longer and deeper. And then finally I hear a door open and she goes, hey, do we have $1 million in unbilled right now for 20 days? And then that pause gets bigger. And she goes, well, we haven't, we've had some staffing short and we haven't. He's like, do we or don't we? And I'm sitting there like, what have I done to this poor Diane? And then she's like, yes. And he goes, I'll call you back, Jon, and hangs up on me. And it was like just one of the worst moments of this guy finding out. And I said, listen, everybody should own their data. Everybody should know their data, right? But I never knew what happened to poor Diane. I hope she's well. I'm sure she was just understaffed. Brilliant woman, I'm sure. But listen, we ain't got enough staff out here to keep up with all these payers. So that's my scary story. Guys, this has been a fantastic episode. I want to end really with a lot of fun. But I will say this. I mean, to me, Tales from the Drip, a collection of the scariest story infusion, tells us that we have a really shifting, scary landscape to navigate for our clients. We do. And for all of our clients and other infusion professionals out there, we've got to know, you've got to protect your data. You've got to protect your processes. You've got to make sure, because this is not an easy place to do business and care for your patients. So there are a lot of scary stuff out here, and hopefully it gets solved this next year. But my guess is next year when we do this, and we'll have more scary stuff to talk about. So guys, I want to end on this. We do like to have fun over here. You don't threaten us with a good time. I want your top Halloween candy and the worst Halloween candy. Okay. And so I will start with Pam, and we're going to go through top first, and then we'll go through worst. Pam, I want you to make yourself into a 10-year-old little lady in a Dora or whatever, Sophia the First, whatever 10-year-old girls like today. I'm aging myself because I don't know what they like now. And you're walking up to that house. What do they drop in and you say, score? That's number one candy. What is it? What's your brand?
Bit of honey. Hands down.
Bit of honey.
Come on. Go to
Not
mama.
Werther's.
My word.
Bit of honey.
You just transferred us back in time. Bit of honey.
Bit of
Lord
honey.
have mercy. You're going to be picking that out of your teeth for 4 days. Bit of honey. I did not see that coming. Brian.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Man, Brian, 10-year-old Brian in an Iron Man. He's going down the street. What do they drop in your bucket? And you're like, number one, first round draft pick candy. What is it? Twix. Fair. That's fantastic. Twix is fantastic. It's like 3 different ones in one. I'm not on board with Pam. Totally on board with Brian. All right. Got it. All right. Brandon. All right. You were probably something dorky like a Minecraft or something because you're so smart, so growing up. So
Minecraft, we didn't even have the internet when I was 10, Jon. I'm not.
Yeah, but if it were today, it'd be Minecraft. All right. Little Brandon.
So
what is your number one?
Listen, I know, back in the day, people would say crazy stuff, but I'm like homemade popcorn balls or caramel apples. Like back in the day when I was trick-or-treating, got the homemade stuff. That's what
we
I'm
weren't
all
allowed
about.
the homemade stuff because my mom said that if you made it homemade, you probably wanted to poison kids. So if it was homemade, I'm also from North Little Rock, Arkansas.
I was gonna
little
say
bit
you're
of
from
the-
Grangland.
Yeah,
In
a
California,
little
they
bit.
put razor blades in the popcorn.
That's what they told me. There might be razor blades in that. You know, we grew up hearing that there are people at home that do nothing but put razor blades in it.
Listen, I grew up in small town Arkansas. We knew where those popcorn balls and caramel apples came from. So
That's fair. Yeah. All right. Mine was what we call full size house. All right. I didn't care if it was chocolate and they were giving out full size Reese's it was a run. It was like Miss Clarice is giving out full size Snickers. It was like everybody goes. So I didn't care. I just wanted the big one. So finishing up with this absolute worst. They put this in there and you're like, why? Worst Halloween candy. Pam, go.
Those little sixlets in the tube.
They're
round,
terrible.
They're M&Ms. They're not chocolate.
They're not.
M&Ms. And
They're
there's
awful.
only like six. Wah,
They're
wah,
awful.
wah.
And they all come in a bag full of other bad stuff too. You know, like, listen, Laffy Taffy's not bad. I just don't want it on Halloween. Halloween should be a premier candy day. All right, Brian, go.
Anything that's just like chewy sugar, like.
So like Laffy Taffy?
No, just sort of like a jelly bean kind of stuff. I'm thinking black licorice. I hate black licorice. Something like that. I want chocolate. I want a candy bar.
Good. I'm with that. Brandon.
Candy corn.
You stole mine, Brandon. There's nothing worse than candy corn.
Candy corn is an abomination.
It's awful.
Just like peanuts.
Why should it be there? It's like circus peanuts. Who invented this and said it was good? What they did was they took candle wax and they put the smallest amount of flavoring you could put in it. And then they gave it to some poor kid who had never had a better candy. And that kid grew up his whole life thinking this was candy.
What it was, John, is it's the corn lobby. It's the corn lobby.
It is the corn lobby.
They needed to.
It is. $5 says payers hand out candy corn to their people at Halloween.
Yeah.
$5.
Nobody likes to eat their corn. Yeah. Nobody likes to eat their corn. And now that fructose corn syrup is bad. Yep. Let's try to make a candy out of all of it.
Yeah. I believe all the Blue Cross Blue Shields, they hand out candy corn to all their people, I think, and they tell them how much they love them. So
because they don't give out dental insurance.
100%. All right. Hey, listen, with you troublemakers, it's so much fun being on with you guys. And so this has been Tales from the Drip, a collection of scary stories from the infusion market and infusion therapy market. And so thanks to all of our listeners and our viewers. We love doing this. We're committed to you. These 4 businesses are committed to you. We're committed to raising up and continuing to lift up the infusion therapy market. We'll see you again in November.